This is EDBEAT. I'm April Cummings. That's Patrick Brendel. Patrick, I was going to do this thing because I couldn't find a flashlight, and I realized I wasn't as funny as I thought I was.
It's terrifying.
That's
I'm
true.
glad you didn't do that.
So spooky. So this is the Halloween special edition of Cayman Current, yeah?
Yeah.
And what's in our goodie bag today?
Lateral flow testing.
I'm hilarious. That there is. So what was it, Friday evening? I think we finally got the policy for lateral flow testing, which has been, dare I say, widely touted as the solution to all of our COVID-related problems in the Cayman Islands, now having finally had to deal with it like everybody in the rest of the world. And interesting. What did you think?
Yeah, talking about werewolves and vampires, lateral flow testing is the silver bullet the government's promising to handle COVID in the community.
We spent so much time thinking about those clever things to say. I need to point that out. So is it the silver bullet? What does it look like? Let's talk a little bit about what this policy does and what the government thinks it will do.
Yeah, I guess for people who don't know, the tests that they've been using for COVID, which take hours, sometimes even a day or two for the results to come back, they're called PCR tests. And that's where you go to the nurse or the clinic or the drive-through, and they get the big Q-tip and swab you pretty good. And that's kind of the gold standard for COVID testing with 99-ish% accuracy. So lateral flow tests are new to Cayman. They've been used a lot in the UK. And so you can think of these as rapid response tests. And they're not as accurate, but it gives you a really good idea of the level of COVID you may have in your body at that moment. And so these are home testing kits. So you do them yourselves, and they come with a much smaller Q-tip, and you get the results in about 15 to 30 minutes. So what the government is proposing basically is in cases where, speaking of in the school context, where a child tests positive for COVID, no longer will their whole class group be put into quarantine or isolation, pending the results of a PCR test, which can take a day or two. Now what they're going to do is, if a kid tests positive for COVID, they yank all the kids out of class and they take lateral flow tests. And for a period of they're calling it a 10-day surveillance period. So for a period of 10 days, all the kids in the class take these lateral flow tests. And as long as that test result is negative, they can keep going to school. And similarly, in the workplace context, this is the same kind of standard is going to hold true for people being able to go to work. So if you're a parent and your kid gets sick with COVID, and as long as you're doing your lateral flow test every day, and as long as it's coming back negative, you can continue to go to work as well.
So this policy, Patrick, I just wanted to let folks know, I pulled it up on the screen from the Cayman Islands government, and I'm not the best scroller in the world here, but we basically have an 11-page policy, a little bit of background, talks about how they define things, how it all works, but I know you broke it all down for us in Cayman Current, did you not?
I did.
Of course you did.
But it's a lot of if-thens. So it's almost like you can read the whole thing and try to digest it, or you can wait until you come into one of the scenarios and then you consult it as a guide. But kind of the spirit of it is they're trying to replace these isolation and quarantine periods with these surveillance periods of daily testing, so that kids can stay in school and people can keep going to work.
And that's at the core of the purpose here, really. We heard quite a bit of discussion building up to the release of this about really, I think, how crippled things, the economy became for a minute, and parents couldn't work. Businesses were having trouble adapting to the rapid increase in numbers of folks, some of whom did not have COVID, And therefore, this is supposed to help speed all that up and make it a whole lot easier for everyone. At least that's the hope anyway. What was your take on the policy itself? I mean, do you think that it covered all the ground, or is this a wait and see?
I think they try to be as thorough as possible, but of course, there's going to be these in between scenarios that slip in. Um, One thing that I'm wondering about is the cost of the testing and the availability of the test kits. So what they say is kind of the fallback position is if you're unable or unwilling to do the lateral flow testing, which is for actually for people 2 and over. So if you have a child younger than 2, they can't take the lateral flow test, for example. Or if for some reason you're opposed to the daily testing, it defaults back to the 10-day isolation period being
Right.
cleared by the PCR test. So what I mean, kind of news that's been coming around the island is the stores and pharmacies and grocery stores and A.L. Thompson's all got this shipment of lateral flow tests,
Right.
and immediately people went out and bought them like they were toilet paper, and
Okay.
so they're already running short of these test kits. Um, the schools have been provided with supplies of them by the government,
Right.
but that's kind of under a different program than the surveillance program that we
Mm,
can talk about as well.
right. So
If you
that
want me to talk about it, I will.
I will bring it up in a minute. So the expense of the tests, the availability of the tests, these are two key concerns. And I did see it as well. I mean, at first I thought, oh, they're exaggerating. No, but we also saw what happens to the system when you have a rise in cases. So they were trying to churn out large numbers of tests. Um, I probably know a half dozen people now who have COVID that, you know, up to this point wouldn't have known any differently anyway. So the increase in testing, even the lateral flow testing, also means an increase in the numbers of positives and the people who go into isolation and quarantine. Even with these tests, it may limit some of the numbers, but we're also potentially going to see a corresponding increase in the number of positives as well, because we just haven't been testing that much across the island of late, right? Or am I misreading that?
Yeah, I mean, I think COVID is here. It's probably been here longer than we've realized due to our really good vaccination numbers. It's limited the symptoms. So, probably a lot of people have been walking around asymptomatic with it for a certain period of time. Um, but it's like that that statement could be false because we
Yeah,
don't know because we
we
haven't
don't
been
know.
testing. Um, it's interesting because it was kind of a fad for a while in other countries where they were doing these antibody tests.
Hmm.
So they were trying to pick up people who had COVID and didn't know it. But of
Right,
course, that's difficult now that you have the vaccination program.
right, right. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the surveillance program. And I'm just going to take a second and pull up, um, hopefully, I can pull up a document. Talk about the surveillance program for us a little bit. How does that work? And how does that fit in with all this?
So is this the surveillance or the screening?
Screening
We're going
first.
to get super technical.
I
So
know.
we
So,
talked about a little bit about the surveillance, which is kind of what you do when you are the primary contact of someone who has COVID.
right,
So you basically you test yourself for either 10 days or 14 days, depending on vaccination status. Um, but then there's an accompanying screening program that's just for schools. And so what that is school is voluntary, and schools can sign up to conduct their own kind of proactive COVID screening program where they try to detect COVID in students and teachers before any symptoms develop. And when it comes down to it, the government will provide the schools with testing kits, and then they will test students and teachers who volunteer 2 times a week. So this is just 2 times a week, spaced at least 3 days apart, and you just start screening the student body. And hoping to pick up asymptomatic COVID cases before it becomes like another outbreak. And in that program, the government will provide those kits free of charge.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the going market rate for COVID for these lateral flow tests is $7. That's kind of what they've been selling for on the island.
Yeah, I've seen
So that's
5 or 6 to 8,
yeah.
almost 8. So that's about right.
Yeah, so it's they're cheap, but these costs will add up pretty quickly when you're talking
Yeah.
about say $12 to $15 a week per person.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure about a lot of things like what health insurance covers, what it doesn't. But inside the school setting, the government's going to pay for these. And
So
when
that's
it comes to
voluntary, right? Like you said, it's a
yes,
voluntary program. It's not like they're mandating that these have to be taken across the board.
correct. And so when it comes to in terms of the screening, so with the screening program, the government's going to pay for the test. When it comes to the surveillance testing, which is again what happens when your sibling or child test positive for a classmate test positive for COVID. I don't know who's supposed to pay for those tests and where they're supposed to come from. It doesn't say in the guidance document. I've been told by a teacher that the government schools will be providing those tests to their students and the surveillance program. And I think that's significant because if you are guessing $6 or $7 per test for 10 days of surveillance, which is the minimum, that's $60 or $70 per kid. And then if during the 10-day, say if a kid tests positive for COVID, then the whole class goes into the surveillance program. If, say, on day 8 of the surveillance program, any person in that class tests positive for COVID, it resets the timer.
Mm-hmm.
So you do another 10 days, and you have to do 10 days in a row where nobody in that class group tests positive for COVID. So if you're going 20, 30 days in a row, that's $140, $200 per kid. So if you have multiple kids, all of a sudden you're talking, what do they say?
I'm flipping through the premier's statement to see if he actually mentioned any specifics. I guess I should refer to that. So the premier also, before heading off to COP26, um, he did a video statement on YouTube, basically trying to reassure folks that there's not going to be a lockdown, that we're still planning to open on the 20th of November. A little bit about the flow test policy being released, but really just a message trying to reassure folks. Now, for some reason, Patrick, I think I've lost you for a little second here. Yep, you're frozen in fear. Let me take you out and bring you back in. So basically, the premier's video message really sort of serves to reassure folks that everything is going to be okay. He understands it's scary, but also at the same time, people are going to, just as a country, we're going to need to get used to this and do our best to keep each other safe. And just sort of a general message reassuring the public that everything's going to be fine. So I'll post a link to that as well with our post of this edition of EDBEAT. I know Patrick's internet is angering him, so he'll be back in just a second. And so also in this current edition of Cayman Current, and I want to just share my screen really quickly so that you guys can see that. Here we go. So Patrick put together, I think, a pretty comprehensive article, really just explaining how all this works, defining what the different components of it are. Oops, I think I hear him back in. All right, let me bring Mr. Patrick back. Hi, Patrick, you're here, but your screen's blocked, so I'm just going to keep talking until you get until it returns to us. There we go. Okay, so I pulled up Patrick's website so that we could take a quick look kind of at the article that he's posted, which really just, outlines information about the policy. He links to the document. He refers to the premier's statement as well. And basically the idea here is really to try to just make it easy to understand how it all works. All right, Patrick, you're back. I've talked the whole time you were gone. I just gave people, kind of showed them your article in Cayman Current and gave them an idea of kind of what they could expect there. You're back. Okay, yeah, love the
The
internet
computer just shut
bad.
down.
Yeah, it was like, yeah, no, we're not
That's
doing that.
good.
All right, so I forgot where you were up to because I was very busy blathering and showing
Yeah.
people the article.
Well, I was, in terms of how much money it's going to cost, if you have multiple children doing prolonged periods of daily LFT testing, the saying is a million here, a million there, and pretty soon you're talking about real money.
Yeah, yeah.
So that, it's really could be an obstacle for a lot of families on the island. And again, in the government schools, some government schools are going to provide the tests. I don't know about what happens in the private school system, who's responsible. And so really it's kind of the limits of this program in my mind are the cost of the tests and the availability of the test kits. Because if we don't have the test kits, you default back to the quarantine position.
Mm-hmm. Which is what really we're trying to avoid at this stage. And, as we mentioned at the beginning, it's, for example, Halloween weekend, and there, even though life in Cayman has changed, it also hasn't changed that much in some ways. Teenagers are still teenagers and they still want to go to the parties, and kids want to do the trick or treating. And, those sorts of exchanges of things are where these things happen, right? So trying to prevent an outbreak in the schools, which, as we saw, just moved very, very quickly, or at least appeared to, as you referenced earlier, or maybe it was there the whole time and we didn't know. But as we do know, there are actions we have to take in order to mitigate the risk. And this is where the tests are supposed to help. But I still argue that maybe we do need to continue to push the other components of risk mitigation, like wash your hands for 20 seconds and that kind of stuff. And by the way, all the schools are doing some things, but some are doing more than others, I think. And so that's another interesting thing for me as well. Are we going to police the school environments, or are we just going to trust that everyone is going to do the best they can, and we hope for the best? Because November 20th is right around the corner, and that also has, even though the folks who are coming in will be vaccinated, that does not mean that they can't have COVID at all. Doesn't mean it can't be transmitted at all. It just mitigates some of the impact. So that does also, more people introduces more risk, in my view.
Yeah, and I guess with the COVID safety measures, all of those are still in place in the school, so that hasn't changed. In terms of who's doing the inspections of them, I don't know. It may come under the school inspection unit, but they haven't produced a school inspection report since maybe June. So there haven't been any this school year so far.
And I
So I
don't
don't
think
know
that
if
the
that's going to be.
criterion has changed either that we know of, right? So this is sort of a public health issue, but it's also a school and safety issue too. So I don't know that they've changed the criterion for the
Yeah,
policy.
they always look for things like fire safety, public health safety. One might assume that any COVID protocols from public health would be included in what they're looking for on the checklist. But I don't know.
Well, I don't know either. So many questions. That's the beauty, though, of getting paid to be a reporter for a living, is you just get to ask lots and lots of questions and then more from there. So yeah, so the LFT policy, as I am now calling it, is out. I do have some questions, which I hope will be answered in the coming days. I do appreciate that the policy has both outlines some of the benefits and the limitations, which I think is also helpful to bear in mind. Because much like the vaccine program, you have to be careful, I think, about these unilateral, is that the right word? Unilateral statements? My dad used to say
One-sided
absolutes,
blanket
blanket statements. But it's the
only
idea.
sits still in absolutes.
Absolute. No, my dad didn't like those because he used to say, never say never, never say never. So you don't know necessarily we saw it backfire for folks in terms of the vaccination information. So people came out, this is going to fix everything. And then it didn't fix everything, and then viruses mutate and things change and mutate. I still say mutate viruses, but um, the point being that circumstances are going to change. So there's no one size fits all solution pretty much ever, in my view. As soon as we go down one path, then things change and they have to adapt accordingly. And that's a sort of expectation setting that I think would be really helpful when you're dealing with so many different facets of society here. Oh, Patrick froze again on me. He looks really good though. He's just like sitting there, like looking really like, hey, April, you're so smart. You're saying all the right things and whatnot. I'm telling you, it's a good time. And I was going to share with you guys today, which I do not have, but I'm going to pop it on afterwards. I was going to share that we gave Patrick a lovely cake to celebrate EDBEAT with from Carousel Bakery, and it was so cute. And I'll put it on here in a minute when Patrick comes back, but it was really, really, really great. It's gorgeous. It has like the little logos you can see or whatever. And Patrick and his kids ate the entire cake in an afternoon. So I think it's a good day. All right. So as Patrick comes back to us, just a quick, hey, Patrick, I hear you back there. Let me go turn you back on here. Cool. All right. Yeah, you're definitely like, you spent a minute like this.
Yeah, the computer shut off again.
So it's a sign you have to go to church. That's what's happening right now. So I did tell folks about your wonderful cake, which I will, through the magic of editing, show them the cake that you and your kids ate in one entire afternoon.
Yeah, there's one half of a piece left, like one of the corner pieces. So I'm saving it.
Celebration time. It's like a wedding cake. Like a year from now, you'll have that cake and you revisit your experience with the launch of EDBEAT.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
So I know
we didn't realize it was a chocolate and vanilla cake. So we ate all the chocolate side first, and then you had the vanilla surprise.
Like, woo!
Yeah,
All right.
it's like getting two cakes.
To be honest, I am quite the fan of those things. Okay, so I was looking. I didn't cover any other subjects related to this behind your back. Is there anything else you wanted to make sure we talked about this week before I let you escape and your computer do its Windows update? Because that's got to be a Windows machine.
Yeah. Well, I guess the only other thing of note is something we've been keeping an eye on, which is the Red Bay primary situation involving the allegations of mistreatment of students by staff. And we checked in again. Investigation is still ongoing, and the acting principal is still in charge. So nothing's changed. We're going on 6 months, I believe.
Wow, it's a long
But
time.
we'll keep an eye on it.
We definitely will. And I do have a delightful, I had a great morning visiting John Gray High School last week that I haven't had a chance to share. I don't think I shared the video yet, but by the time this airs, I will. But it was so fun. They, teachers are dorky, right? But they are launching a numeracy program. And really it's kind of a simple premise, right? They were going to take, go through the curriculum and look at all the different opportunities there are to cement the connection between numeracy and these more practical, or in some cases more interesting subjects that kids are working on. It was one of the things that came out of the coincidentally, as we mentioned, the inspection report was that they needed to, I'm going to use the word cement the connection between these things or connect the dots. But what was really fun was watching, the kids are going by going, this is so embarrassing. The teachers are playing music and, they had like a little numeracy photo booth and they're taking their pictures in there and the kids are like, but then it was over the course of the morning, it was really interesting to see how they kind of did get into it and were having fun. And the older kids, I ended up interviewing a couple of I guess they're year 11s, the older young people. And they were so mature. They were like, it's so important for the young people to, understand about numeracy, and this is going to really help in their educational journey. And I was like, wow, you guys are so articulate, man. It was really fun. But it was just kind of nice to see the energy and the enthusiasm, because, math is not something that I love dearly with all my heart. I know I just don't. But I appreciate the importance of it. But I do think that sometimes if teachers made the connection between the things that you do like and the things that you struggle with, sometimes it's easier for you to pick up certain concepts. And so they've got like a little logo, and they're going to put the logo across these different things across the school and in different classes and stuff. And I just thought it was clever. But even more importantly than the math bit is the idea that you take what you had a good as a school, and instead of sitting back on the good, you look at the areas that need improvement and actually do some work to get good to excellent, And I think that that's a great sign of a school's character, and the teaching staff's commitment and administration's commitment to continual improvement, not just we're good, we're fine.
Yeah, and that's what I hear a lot, even from schools that have been rated excellent, and we see it all the way from nurseries up to UCCI on last week. The idea of continuous improvement, year on year on year.
I like it. All right, so that's about all we have time for, because Patrick's computer is going to shut off on
Yeah,
us again.
it's
Just in
Halloween. We
principle.
got the ghost in the machine.
For real, man. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to check out caymancurrent.org. There is, what is it? There are so many interesting articles about education. I had to get my grammar right because it's about education. See, so I had to stop.
Yeah, default to a myriad of. There's a myriad of stories.
There is a myriad of excellent content on there. And in particular, I like to say Patrick does a really great job as well as of analyzing information and data, which really does help provide context to some of the things that we kind of throw the, anecdotally stuff about, but we really don't have the numbers to support some of the things that we say about our schools, about education, even things as simple as enrollment. So I think it's one of your finest features at Cayman Current, Patrick.
Thank you.
He's like, yay.
Yeah,
All right, well,
one of many.
One of many.
Not enough time to list them all.
No, but I had a good start on it. I had a good start. Yeah. All right, so thanks everybody for joining us. And don't forget, Cayman Current is also a nonprofit. So he's got like a little thing, and you can donate and support the cause of covering education in our community.
Yeah.
Bye,
thanks.
everybody. Okay, now I dorkily have to find the button to put this picture up. There you go. I did it.